Dave Lochran, Ben Rasa, bringing you a 12-game Sunday 1 p.m. slate. Well, 1 and 4 p.m. games. We're not getting in anything after that. Ben, how you feeling, guy?
All right. First, every week has kind of a new wrinkle. This is the first week where I really had trouble actually building teams. I don't know if it was tighter pricing or I just like only expensive plays that'll make it tough. But I had trouble putting teams together, which I kind of like that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think we have different opinions to some extent on this slate, though,
Good.
because I feel like there are a lot of there are too many receivers that could have these monster games, and you feel like there aren't really any that you like all that much to begin with. So, what do you say we just dive into it and we'll figure it out as we go along?
Let's do it.
All right. So yeah, 12 games, a lot of uncertainty. We'll start with a game that really isn't that enticing, though. Tennessee at Buffalo. Um, I do have some Buffalo defense, Ben. I know it
Oh yeah.
probably not a good thing. And by some Buffalo defense, I mean I have too much Buffalo defense. They're so cheap. There aren't any cheap defenses I really like this week. Um, but here's the problem. I think let's see. Let me get to my exposure here. I have I have 7%, so I have 11 lineups with LaShawn McCoy,
Okay.
and I know he's just been dreadful this year, but so much of that is a byproduct of how bad this team has been, and that isn't to say that this team can't be terrible again, but at this price at home where he's been significantly better, I mean, way better since coming to Buffalo, but whether you want to buy into it or not, I still believe that at 4,900, LaShawn McCoy, one time this season, can have himself a game. So, yeah, I'm going to get a little bit of him in there just in case it happens.
Yeah, the old Bills. I'll start the show with a hot take. I think the Bills win today.
All
I
right.
think they win at home.
So do I.
I like their defense as well for a cheapie. I have a little McCoy. I see it. It's just a weird situation. I'll give the case for it as this. They've played obviously 4 games. They were shut out. They were decimated by the Ravens. So those two, when that happens, you're not getting there, of course. The Minnesota game was just, and he didn't play there, but they just blew them out. The only game where it resembled just a generic loss was that Chargers game, and in that game, you saw some semblance of offense.
Mm-hmm.
So you spoke about it. Could they get shut out again at home? Yeah, they're very, very bad. But I think the Titans are in a pretty bad spot coming off the OT game. Weird game. Just I think the Bills hang around, and if they do, you have to assume that McCoy and the defense are doing most of that.
Yeah, if it's even remotely competitive, McCoy's going to get work. I mean, just take the game against Minnesota, right? McCoy wasn't healthy. He didn't play. But Ivory saw 20 carries. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just say that this game is competitive and that Marcus Mariota reverts back to the, trash bag that he is. Um, then you have, a legitimate opportunity. So look, it's a big risk. But the nice thing is you're not in week one, there were people saying, yeah, I think 6K is kind of cheap on 6,200 is kind of cheap on McCoy. Well, now there's no question. For sub 5K is at least kind of cheap on McCoy. So yeah, that's where I stand on that. Now, let me ask you something though on the other end. Derrick Henry this season has faced matchups of Philadelphia, dreadful matchup. They don't allow anyone to run on them. They are one of the best run stopping defenses in the league. Face Jacksonville, face Houston, face Miami. So mostly all solid run defenses there. Do you think Derrick Henry has a chance to put up some decent numbers here against Buffalo, assuming this game stays close?
It's I see the logic for it. I think that you just highlighted it. He's gotten a bad draw so far, and he needs the game. They need to be ahead because Dion Lewis is the asset in the passing game. There's just too much risk there for me for not enough reward. I think you need a perfect game script. He needs to not get vultured. He's got to get the end zone because he's not a threat in the passing game. So for someone who's higher on the Bills, in just the regular game than most, I'm not going to bank on the Titans getting that perfect game script for him. And he did not make the cut for me.
Yep, fair enough. I think I have like 3 or 4%, but that's just in case. I mean, really, it comes down to I'd rather just pay a little bit more for McCoy and know that he can catch passes. There's no one else in that backfield that's going to siphon away passing down work from McCoy, if it's a close game, of course.
Mhm.
Whereas with Henry, it's going to be Lewis, and we know that for a fact.
Yep, totally agree.
You have anything else here? Any Davis, Tywan Taylor, anyone we haven't discussed?
I think some people will chase Corey Davis, and if he's going to see those type of targets, of course, I don't think we see that going forward. Taylor's somewhat interesting, but I'll be honest, I found a couple other cheapies down there that I prefer, so I don't have much on the Titans side as a whole.
All right, fair enough. Neither do I. I think I'm staying away from this, and a lot of it too is just I don't have enough room to fit these guys in. They're tertiary plays at best, and that's pretty much pushed them out of my lineups. But yeah, I'm gonna have a little bit of McCoy. Just as last week, the Aaron Jones from last week, I made sure to have some Aaron Jones. I think I finished with 11% Aaron Jones. Probably finished with 7 to 10% McCoy today, just in case he happens to have a decent game. And he's just been so much better at home for his career. I think Buffalo keeps this close. And you said you think they win, so
I do.
Pittsburgh and Atlanta, highest over/under, highest total on the slate. Might be this is probably the highest total on the season so far. Could be wrong, right? But it's got to be
close to 60. This is really up there.
Yeah,
like
a 58 total and a 3-point spread too, right? It's not like a college over/under that's at 70 points and one team is a 57-point favorite.
yeah, the team total for one team is 9. You're
right.
Well, it's hard to run it back with nobody.
Yeah. Right. There was a 59.5 over/under. I forget what game it was yesterday. The one team had scored 56 points. The other team was at 3 points with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
That's what happens. It's
it's dreadful.
This is a wild one.
Yeah. Look, you have Atlanta is just they're emaciated defensively, right? There's no meat left on the bone here. They've lost starting linebackers, I believe they lost a D tackle too, lost starting safeties. They've just been crushed at every position. We know what pass catching running backs do to them. We know how they've been beat in the middle of the field. And we also know that Roethlisberger hasn't looked spectacular this season, but he's at home in Heinz Field against an Atlanta team that's just looked so I think they rival any other team for worst defense in the league right now. Seriously, that's how bad with the injuries they've become.
Yeah, they're just not, and it's tough because they have it's not a specific scheme, but they have what they want to do. And when you lose the components, it's not like you can change to a new defense. So they're running the same thing. They're just ill-equipped to do it. And you're seeing that with, these backs are torching them. They're being torched all around. And I agree. There's no end in sight to that. That brings a guy that it's not that I'm not a fan of him, but James Conner, he had that huge week 1. I thought the production would come down. It has, not just in production, but the volume came down a little. This is a pretty good spot for him. I do have some, you can really look across. I mean, Juju, Antonio Brown, I don't know how much explanation you need there. If you can get him and you like him, get him. Vance McDonald, I think's in play. Is there anyone else? I mean, those are the big 4. And then obviously Ben is a quarterback that you can consider.
Yeah, it's really tough to not get some Antonio Brown in this week. He has a long reception of 27 yards this year. That's concerning. Teams are taking away the long ball, giving them the middle of the field, which is why Juju. I know I've said this a lot, but it's relevant. Which is why Juju and Vance have had so much success. But I'm still going to have some Antonio Brown this week. There's just no way I can't get him in there. It has to happen. It just has to. I have some Juju, but no, I also have a lot of James Conner. I mean, this is an Atlanta team that gives up so much pass catching work to opposing running backs. And yeah, you were right. The Conner's production has definitely tailed off. But then on that same token, you're talking about a guy that's still, getting almost all of the backfield work regardless, right? They played from behind in 2 games and he didn't get much work on the ground, but he's still averaging 6 targets a game in games where they're playing with the lead which has only been once playing tied or with the lead. It's only been once all season, right? Played from behind real early against Kansas City, real early against Tampa Bay, and then early against Baltimore. So, I think this game script should work more in Connor's favor. And you see him just pound the rock and get work in the passing game. I really like him. So you can't play all of them, though. I obviously like Vance McDonald a lot, too. I think it'd be chalky, but it's a very good spot. Let me ask you, in terms of Connor, Juju, and Antonio Brown, how are you prioritizing?
For me, I know it's a slight price difference, but even factoring that in, it's Antonio, then Connor, and then probably the field in terms of overweight, underweight for me, and then I will be underweight on Juju.
Okay. Is that just a strategy thing, or you think that he's not going to have a solid game?
No, it's more that I think, and maybe I'm wrong and things have truly shifted, but I think Antonio Brown is hitting more floor games right now, and he's due to break out, where Juju has been taking advantage of something that is, and is the price is kind of priced up for him maximizing a little more than we've seen. So I expect him to maybe regress slightly, and Antonio to have one of those monster, 35, 40 point outbreaks.
Yeah, for sure. I think Antonio can do it here. I think this is the spot, and you got to take a chance on him. You have to. I mean, the fact that he hasn't had one Antonio Brown game all year, right?
No, I mean, the 1 week, I think it was week 2, where it was like, all right, this is it. And it wasn't.
No. Week 1 was 24 fantasy points. In overtime, though, full overtime period. Outside of that, he hasn't topped 17.
Yeah.
There's no way he just sits by and is idle for this long. At some point you got to say, all right, this is where it happens. And I think I'm going to roll the dice on it being today. What about on the other side of this game, though? You have a ton of weapons. You have Julio Jones. Oh, and by the way, I do have plenty of Roethlisberger today, but there are some cheap quarterbacks that make it hard to just load up on him. Julio Jones. You have Calvin Ridley. You've got both healthy running backs in Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman. You have Mohamed Sanu, Austin Hooper. I'm just pretty much throwing out anyone that can catch a pass for or produce offensively for this Atlanta team. There are a lot of different ways they can move the ball.
Yeah, it makes it, for a game that's super juicy. At the same time, there's a lot of room to have it get there in terms of the total and have you swing and miss. That's happened to me multiple times already with the Falcons specifically. It's mostly because I just refuse to play Calvin Ridley. I have 0% once again. He could score 2 touchdowns for the rest of the year on this volume, and I will never play him. It's just not going to happen.
I hear you, man.
I don't mind Sanu. He's 4K. I think that's pretty juicy. Don't even mind it for cash. And then Julio, obviously, he's not the red zone. It is what it is. He's going to get some touchdowns here and there, and he's getting there regardless at this point. So it's tough to have him and Antonio Brown. I prefer AB if I had to take one, but I did make some teams that have Julio. I'm not touching the running backs, though. Now that Freeman is back, stay away from me.
Yeah, I have no interest in the running backs either, but I do have some Julio. The thing is, how much Julio can you get when you have a lot of Antonio Brown, right? I think I have like 33% Antonio and 15% Julio. And even that was tough to do, honestly.
It's tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? Mohamed Sanu, I get that. I totally understand that, but he is so touchdown or bust that you need him to score. And it's not that he can't, but you also know that he's going to be the lowest owned player on this team, maybe along with Austin Hooper. I don't think Austin Hooper is a crazy play either if you need a cheap tight end. I don't think it's insane, but I don't know if it's necessary either. I have a cheap wide receiver that we'll get to shortly that I think has a lot of potential to put up a solid game here, and he's going to be super low owned, and it might allow you to get away from somebody like Sanu or some of these other cheap guys. But, oh, look at that. Perfect segue, Ben. That was not intentional. We come to the Denver and New York Jets game. Again, entirely unintentional, but this should work. The guy I was talking about is Courtland Sutton. Here, let me tell you why. You look at him and you're like, man, he's been pretty underwhelming this year. I think I've unfortunately watched every Broncos game, and every one of those games, he comes 1 or 2 plays away from having a monster performance, right? Last week, comes down with a beautiful pass in the corner of the end zone. I think he was pushed out of bounds. Had a big drop. He's had plays nullified on for several different reasons throughout the year. I'm not saying that Courtland Sutton is going to win you tournaments, but I'm saying it's possible at 3,400. He's seen 5 targets, 6 targets, then only 3, and then 6. If he is somebody that is looked to that can be looked to in the red zone. He's a big-bodied receiver. Is it risky? Sure, but he's $3,400. I like what I've seen from him. He's made some mistakes. He only had that drop that probably wouldn't have made a difference anyway because they wouldn't have been able to line up and get the ball off and get the snap off in time. But at 3,400 on DraftKings, yeah, I'm going to have a little bit of Courtland Sutton here. And I think it's very possible that you get that 20 fantasy point game from him. I don't think it's out of the equation.
So a couple things. One, and we'll get to him, of course. The Valdez-Scantling guy is the same price, and he's I can't believe there's a popular play, but it's him. So if you want to get away from that, Courtland Sutton, you're right. I watched, against the Chiefs, and he almost caught the ball one-handed when he was getting yanked, and they ended up not giving it to Royce Freeman, which is incredibly tilting. They let Lindsey punch it in, but that's neither here nor there. He's had some opportunities. He is a big body. The one thing I'll say, and we don't know, if scoring once again is on steroids, and I love him a lot more if it's a scrappy kind of slate on the whole, where 150 is a cash line and 200 is serious business, rather than if it's 200. I think his ceiling is somewhat limited, but if he's getting 5+ targets, and I think he will, you could do a lot worse, including Valdez-Scantling, who I get the appeal, but we don't really know what that guy's going to do.
No, we have absolutely no idea. And you know that he's going to be far more popular than Courtland Sutton, right?
No doubt about it.
And it's not like Courtland Sutton can't, here's what I'm saying. It's not like he is a Cole Beasley type frame where you would be insane to target him inside the 10-yard line. You know what I mean? Like, he at least has the potential. He has the size. He has the he's just built to be able to catch touchdowns. And I like that. So
yeah, he reminds me of Josh Doxson on the Redskins, who's another guy like that, where talented, the ceiling seems huge for him in life. I just don't know if he can put it all together. Time will tell, but shown some flashes.
Geez, man, third year for Doxson, and it's been a unmitigated disaster thus far.
Yeah, he's done, but in theory, he should have been good.
I'm with you, man. I was pretty high on him coming into the season, just hoping he could do something for us. Anyway, what else do you have on this game? Because Manny Sanders is not cheap.
I don't have much. This is just an ugly game. Broncos, Keenum, I'm not trying to overreact, but he looked so bad last week. Yeah. It seems unnecessary to go there. On the Jets side, they're just not good. Enunwa's their only weapon. He's going to be in the slot against Chris Harris. That's not good news. I will say, just for, if you want, and I'm talking probably sub 1%, this is an extreme flyer as you're going to get. I have a tiny sliver of Robbie Anderson. They've given up some big plays. I could see him maybe getting over the top if they fall behind, if they're really pushing up on Enunwa. He's shown no chemistry with Darnold at all so far this year. So it's super, and I'm talking a couple of shares in big field tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but all you got to do is connect on one touchdown for 60 yards. I get it. I get it.
And he's that type of guy. He's in the Travis Benjamin, he might only have a couple looks, but if they're 50-yard bombs, he only needs one.
No, I get it. I do. I think it makes sense, and I'm not against it. Courtland Sutton is my guy in that range, not a speed guy, but to the same extent, risky, could give you decent numbers. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chad Kelly if Case Keenum continues to be this bad. I really wouldn't.
That'd be interesting. He's an interesting dude.
I mean, he was just very highly productive in the preseason, and listen, that front office, they're going to be frustrated sooner than later. I think Anun was fine, but again, I don't know what your upside is there. It's just, I had a little bit of him, and then I had to limit it even further because I feel like the ceiling is capped in a spot like this, and it's a 12-game slate. I can't really risk capping the ceiling there. So I think I pretty much wiped him from the pool just because I had to.
Yep.
But he's going to get work. He's probably there's no doubt that he's going to see Chris Harris, so that's not great. But they have moved him around enough to where he might not see him the whole game. But still, it's probably it's not a necessary tournament play or even cash play at his price point. So let's move on, Ben. Let's talk about Jacksonville and Kansas City. This is the first time where you're like, all right, Patrick Mahomes could really struggle. Because even last week, when you're like, all right, probably his worst game of the season, he did about 15 things that blew your mind anyway. You know, the guy's just been outrageously good. He's been outrageously good. Throwing left-handed, rolling left, throwing left-handed, almost wrapped up in a sack and completes the pass for a first down. So many off-balance, across-the-body throws. He just did so much against Denver, despite them getting good pressure and really making him uncomfortable. Now he faces Jacksonville. I don't expect Kareem Hunt to put up even close to the numbers we saw in week 4. I expect numbers week through 3. Tyreek Hill, this, as Jalen Ramsey said, it's not a quarterback running or cornerback wide receiver matchup. It's a lot more than that, and I would agree. But I think it's a tough matchup for Kelsey. Let's talk about Kansas City side first, and then we'll get into it with Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. I don't even know what to say about Mahomes. It was very impressive. He's at home this week. This is another tough defense who should be able to put the heat on him, and we'll see what he does. Tyreek Hill, it is what it is. The price is decent, but he's got a hard matchup. He's gonna have to get loose. He's very fast, so I have a couple shares. I think they'll attack with Kelsey. It's brutal matchup, no doubt, but he's after the sleepwalking early, he's starting to get massive target share each week. Price is nice. That's probably my favorite spot to attack. On the whole, though, and I don't know, I hate things like this. They're calling for heavy rain. Are you factoring that in at all?
Yeah, I think you have to. But I don't. I think I've told you this before. I very rarely let weather influence my plays. It just, generally speaking, whenever I pull players, whenever I fade players based on weather, it bites me in the ass. And these are professional football players. The heavy rain, yeah, it sucks, but you're not talking about wind. There's no real wind. And if there's only 5 mile per hour wind, then you're not going to get me off the guys I like.
Yeah, I think that far too often people overreact to it. And then it comes back and it's like, why did I do this? It is a little concerning. I like D.D. Westbrook a lot on the other side. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate. The price is good, and I've said, and this is a hunch, that he's going to separate himself and become the clear number 1 receiver in Jacksonville. I know he's got Moncrief and Cole, and Yeldon's a fine option this week. So I have some weapons there. I'm using Bortles as one of my quarterbacks. You alluded to some cheapies. I have some Bortles with a couple Jags in certain lineups. And then in different lineups, I have some Jaguars defense. I will continuously be punished, not because I don't think Mahomes is great, but because I think that there's going to be, I'll still contend that he can make some mistakes here. And Jacksonville's D is always turnover prone. They can rack up the points in a hurry.
They can.
They're so 3K, like pretty tempting.
I know. I don't have any of them, but I'm not hating on you for it whatsoever. I think this game. Okay, so I love D.D. Westbrook as well. I think it's a really good spot for D.D. Westbrook. I don't think Moncrief is the worst play. I think if you're talking about getting down into the red zone, Moncrief is your best bet. And Austin Seferian-Jenkins, I just really don't have interest in. I don't feel like having to worry about someone being entirely touchdown or bust. I mean, Moncrief is pretty touchdown or bust, but Austin Seferian-Jenkins is 100% touchdown or bust. And there are some other tight ends I just like more. I tell you though, man, it's hard to get away from TJ Yeldon though. You're talking about a Kansas City team that's literally allowing 99 receiving yards per game to opposing running backs. Think about that. basically 100 yards just to running backs in the passing game per game. That's nuts.
Yeah, that's real bad.
Yeah. They're 32nd, dead last in run defense, DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. They're utter garbage defensively. And you know what? If you do want to factor the rain in, well, dump off life coming for TJ Yeldon. I just think at this price point, he is more valuable than Leonard Fournette because no matter how this game turns, TJ Yeldon's going to be on the field. Sure, Fournette will get his 3 or so targets per game, but Yeldon can rack up 10 targets if necessary. I just think at this price tag, look, I know he's not going to be unowned. He's going to have some popularity here, but I still think Yeldon is a solid option. And he's scored 3 touchdowns. He's gotten in the end zone 3 times this year, once on the ground, twice in the pass through the air. Like, I don't know. I do think that Yeldon does have upside. I think it might have been you, though, that mentioned earlier this week, chalk Yeldon generally never pans out, but I don't know if I can fade him. I think right now I have 25%, and I wish I had more, but I'm just trying to stay remotely conservative on it.
I have him in cash, and I use that to kind of hedge him a little. I have exposure in tournaments. I do worry about Jock Yeldon, though. But I think there's a real chance that we see that middling game where in cash he gets there for you, and in tournaments the fade is actually a decent move.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's tough, though. It is a good spot.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
I think we hit on everything here. I just, with Kansas City's offense, if I'm going anywhere, it'll be Tyreek Hill because I think he can produce against any defense. And it's not like the only targets he's getting are 40 yards downfield. Look at last week when Denver took the deep ball away. Tyreek Hill was capable of producing not a great game, but in terms of targets, in terms of the Mahomes and Reed getting the ball in his hands, that still happened. And if that's going to happen, he can still break one off. And that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's a good point. They're supplementing his floor with a handful of literally the easiest catches you can get where they just take the ball and they give it to him on just a flat pass and he runs for 6 yards. Those add up quickly, and that kind of negates his boom or bust nature to an extent. He's still very volatile, but that helps a ton.
Yeah, exactly. Badger says Fournette is out this week. Yes. I know.
Allison's out as well.
Yeah, Allison's out as well. Dripping Kool-Aid Grape says Shady over Yeldon. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, Dripping Kool-Aid Grape, but I like Shady this week. If you wanted to go Shady over Yeldon in tournaments, sure. But my suggestion is if you're trying to pivot to someone at a similar price point, his name is David Johnson. We'll get there shortly.
Sure.
All right. Yeah, Green Bay and Detroit. Let's talk about it, Ben. Geronimo Allison out. Devontae Adams is playing. And 4 minutes ago, Schefter confirmed that Geronimo Allison is out. We know that Randall Cobb is out. So you're going to have a bouillabaisse of no-name receivers. If you're a casual fan, I mean, we know who Valdez-Scantling and Equanimous St. Brown and Jamon Moore are. Not sure really who is going to get the bulk of the work. That Valdez-Scantling will certainly get some. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, to see Ty Montgomery running a bunch of routes out of the slot. So it's an interesting one. And this is a Detroit team that Aaron Rodgers has had his way with over the past couple of years. I still think this game evolves into a shootout.
So do I. It's kind of similar. It's weird. They're all cheap, and the Steelers, Falcons guys are all expensive. But it's the same concept where I like the game, but I'm having trouble exactly pinpointing, especially on Green Bay's side, where I want to go. Your boy Aaron Jones, think he's in play again? I know it feels a little point chasing-esque, but 4,300, he's one of the only value running backs that I like. And then Jimmy Graham, who I've been on him, he's starting to be better. You have to imagine that he takes more of a target share with these guys being out there, especially in the red zone where he's already a popular target.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too, for sure. I mean, I was much higher on Jones last week because I knew that no one was going to have him. That's not the case this week, but I don't know if he's going to be immensely owned either. And I think he's definitely going to have a fair amount of ownership, but I'd be surprised if he comes in over like 10% in large field tournaments. I don't think he will. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he will, Ben.
Neither do I. You brought up though, I mean, Ty Montgomery,
It's interesting, right?
it certainly is. I don't know how many people will make that connection, and who knows if it's true. It's just you've got guy. I know this Valdez, whatever his name is. I mean, he's
Scantling.
like, who is that? I know he saw some snaps last week. I get it. I get it even for cash if you're punting, if he's going to be out there as much as he is. But man, I mean, this just does have. I know I'm speaking on both sides of it, but it really has the feeling where he gets a handful of targets and he gets you 7 points, and it's tricky. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. I'm going to really dig in to see if Ty Montgomery's going to get some of that because, he's been out there. He's had games, of course. I don't mind that. He's someone I wasn't onto before we started talking about this, but that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I've been mulling that over all week. And last week too, they had opportunities at the goal line where Montgomery was actually in the backfield, lined up next to Rodgers and splitting out. So I don't know. Look, is it risky? Yes, but he's super cheap, and I don't think anyone's really going to consider him here. I do legitimately think it's possible though that we see Ty Montgomery used in the slot. I mean, he is a wide receiver, or he at least was a wide receiver, so it's not a crazy thought. Look, you got to take some risks sometimes. And one thing I like knowing though, Ben, is that Rodgers likes guys that he can trust.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And he's had so many complaints about these rookies over since the beginning of training camp. He trusts Ty Montgomery. If there's one thing we can say positive about him, so.
And that's again, and I get it. And I have some Valdez Scantling or whatever his name is, but I just don't know how much separation does he have over Moore and Equanimeous St. Brown in the sense of, say he makes a mistake, he runs the wrong route, he drops a ball early. How quick are they to just put in one of those other two? Whereas Ty Montgomery is established as he's a weapon for them. Aaron Jones, another weapon. Jimmy Graham, real guys. I know Adams is going to draw Slay, so I don't have that much interest there. But it's tricky. I like the Packers as a whole. Tough to pinpoint the production.
It's tough for me not to consider Adams is tough for me because even in difficult matchups like with Xavier Rhodes, and it doesn't really matter who, he has produced and he has gotten the targets more importantly. But I guess because I don't think he's 100%, I think I'll probably have less of Devontae Adams just because there are so many other wide receivers in that range that I'm targeting. I do like Jimmy Graham quite a bit though here. I think this could be a big game for Jimmy Graham, Ben.
I hope so. I think that's been coming. Him and Rodgers are building it up. He's found the end zone. This is just, for a lot of reasons, I think a really good spot. Not only is he going to get additional looks, I think it sets up pretty well against the defense that I don't worry about too much inside.
I sure as shit hope so, man.
Me too. I have a lot of him.
So. On the other side, you have Matthew Stafford, who I have a whole lot of this week at 5,700, way too cheap. Marvin Jones, egregiously underpriced at 4,700. He has almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns in his 4 career games against the Packers, all of which have come since 2016. Maybe a little Curry and Johnson. I wish his snap count was more reliable, but this is just a game in general that I have a lot of.
Me too. Stafford, my quarterback in cash, my number 1 quarterback on the slate. He should be up there with, like the Cam Newton price, and that 700-800 makes a big difference to me. You talked about Marvin Jones. The price discount certainly is appealing there. If everything was the same, Golden Tate would be the guy I'd look to get to. I certainly paired him up with Stafford as well as Marvin Jones. Golladay, I think he's fine, but the price seems pretty standard. I don't know how big I think that ceiling is, barring something unforeseen. And this is just a team that I really like to mix and match with. I certainly loaded up on some Lions and some Packers. We'll see what comes of it. I don't think outside of those guys, I'm too interested in the running backs. I don't even know who the tight end is, so certainly not playing that. No time, no time for whoever took Ebron's place in that garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Galladay, Tate, Jones. I mean, Jones just because of his price is very hard to ignore. Um, I like all of the pass catcher, all of the receivers, not named T.J. Jones for Detroit. Maybe a little bit of Curry and Johnson, but on a slate like this, I don't know if you have to risk that really low snap count. So Packers have really struggled in the run game, so he's not a bad play. But I do have other options that I'll be targeting, and we've already talked about a bunch of them. All right, Baltimore and Cleveland. If you guys have questions, you can hit us up in the chat. If you think we missed anything, I'll be happy to circle back. Baltimore and Cleveland, dude. Collins has 2 goal line fumbles now this year. Is it seriously? Is anyone surprised that he hasn't been good this year? Like the writing was on the wall, man. I don't. I mean, I never bought into him. I don't buy into him. I think he's fine as like a 10 touch per game type of guy, but as your lead back, I'm not on board. I haven't been. I don't know if I really have anything from this game that I have more than 5% of. Maybe you can change my mind.
No, no, no. Yeah, I want them. I don't. The Ravens need to be contracted. I just don't like Buck Allen. I don't like Collins. They always get me into trouble when I
Oh,
play.
I have a little John Brown. Sorry, I do have a little bit of
Okay.
John Brown just because he
Well,
has second. He has the second most yards on deep passes this year. Is around the league lead in air yards, and for that reason, I do like John Brown, but I think that's it.
he was really good against Pittsburgh. That wasn't on the main slate last week, and I do think not slightly, but performances not on the main slate don't get as recognized. So when a guy kind of quietly does that, it's good to take notice. I have no interest in this game. I have the Browns defense because I always do at home. Good unit, 2,500, and I'm still not sold. I know the Ravens have looked pretty good at times. They had an impressive one against the Steelers last week. I still think Flacco, if you put some heat on him, can force some turnovers there. So, like them, I didn't really mess around with the Browns' weapons. Njoku is one of the tight ends that I looked at. There's just a lot of guys there. Vance McDonald's probably safer in a similar price point.
Oh, you're right. I'm glad you brought up David Njoku. He is the other player that from this game I have some of. I think he will, in terms of just getting a lower owned tight end, as a solid pivot away from Vance, who's going to be very popular. It's going to be Njoku for me. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot about him.
Yeah,
But
I did that same thing. Like I
yeah,
moved off some Vance for him in certain spots. Just not a game that I think I get burned by going underweight as a whole. I don't see a shootout potential here, and I have no interest in guys like Baker or Landry.
agreed. Yeah, and look, Njoku hasn't had a big game yet, but he's super athletic. He does have 2 touchdown upside, believe it or not. Probably not in this game, but he can still get you where you need to go at a bad tight end position. So
Yep.
yeah, I like that too. We'll speed it up a bit here. New York Giants and Carolina, Ben. Greg Olsen returning next week, hopefully. So starting tight ends for both team, Evan Ingram and Greg Olsen are both out. We get some Rhett Ellison and Ian Thomas. Outside of that, for me, this game is just give me both running backs who catch a ton of passes if their team's playing from behind and are going to get all of the work on the ground if it's competitive.
Yeah, I mean, Barkley always gets lost because there's so many guys up there and I never make room for him. But yeah, McCaffrey, absolutely, I have exposure. He's doing it. It was more impressive to see what he did against the Bengals, honestly, because if he has that gear, it seems like he's just game script proof at this point.
Oh yeah.
So I have a little Cam. I still think the way, he's such a threat on the goal line with the way they run their offense. Always a threat to run a 1 or 2 in. The one guy, and it's so hard to make room for him, but talk about lost in the shuffle. Nobody is going to be on Odell relative to what you
I know.
say. And I did make room for him in certain spots. It feels tough because you have to sacrifice a lot, and he's incredibly, in a worse spot than Julio or AB or a lot of other guys. But it's hard to argue if you can get him at a substantial discount in terms of ownership.
I think you're right. It's tough to pull that trigger
It
when you
is.
have AB and Julio, but I mean, it's only a matter of time. The problem is Eli is afraid to throw more than 3 yards downfield, and it drives me nuts, man. It drives me nuts.
It's bad. And who knows, he's starting to really pump up the noise in terms of being mad. They got to get him the ball. They just have to, and I think they
Yeah.
make ways to get him the ball today.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease, huh?
Always, especially with a
Like,
guy like that.
yeah, you would sure hope so. I'm with you there. I think it's worthwhile. It's just really tough to get him in is my only thing.
Yeah.
And then Shepard's prices come up, so I don't hate him, but I'm not huge. I don't like if you're going Cam Newton. I don't think Funchess is a crazy play. He's been very good without Olsen on the field, and he's still affordable. But again, you're talking about a pretty limited ceiling there. So this isn't a terrible game. I think there are nice ways to get away from the field here with this specific game, but it's not one that I'm prioritizing either. I do have some Cam. I do obviously have some Christian McCaffrey. Do you have some McCaffrey?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely have some McCaffrey, um, and I have some Barkley. So that's pretty much where I'm coming in at. But I understand your take on Odell for sure. No doubt about that. Um, Cincinnati and Miami is an interesting one. Miami showed their true colors last week. They just got hammered by the Patriots after starting the season 3-0 against three terrible teams, and now you have very concentrated offense in Cincinnati. You have Tyler Boyd, you have AJ Green, Joe Mixon. And outside of that, there's no Tyler Eifert, there's no John Ross. They're dealing with injuries. The Gio Bernard is out for the next 2 to 4 weeks with an MCL injury. You have to figure that Dalton, who's been very good this season, is going to focus on those three guys heavily.
Yeah, no doubt, and it's tricky. I'm a big Mixon guy. I think he's really, really good. I'm just worried. They've mentioned, conditioning wise, that he may not be able to carry the full load today. His price is up there. I was more interested. Now I've kind of soured. Do you, yeah, Mixon? I mean, are you worried about that?
Um, Honestly, it's less about me being worried and more about how do I fit him.
Yeah, I guess
Like
that's fair.
I only have a few lineups with Mixon in there because it's very hard for me to justify him over a lot of these other running backs. That's the problem. His price tag is kind of in no man's land for me, and that's what makes it tough.
All of them on a whole. I feel like AJ Green is the same thing. He's not
Yep.
priced up with the big boys, and he's not cheap. So it's
Yep.
hard to pay 7,200 for a guy that we don't know exactly what's going on with Tyler Boyd. He's a good player. I don't know if he's going to be seeing these kind of targets going forward, but it's the kind of thing for me with Cincy. You could make a case for any of them, and I would say I get it, but I didn't go out of my way to force any of them in either.
That's where I'm at too. And I'll be honest, it scares me a little bit. It scares me
Yeah.
a bit. But yeah, it's a little bit concerning, but at the same time, I do think that this is a slate where if I had one suggestion, it would be don't get locked in too hard on any one player because I could probably point to another game and give you somebody that could match or exceed that production. Like that's just how this week kind of feels. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's funny. I really flattened it, and I have multiple, whether it's Stafford or these other guys. I went a lot of different directions where a lot of times my teams all kind of interconnect. This is not a week like that. Like I know for a fact I will have some really good teams and some teams that are so incredibly horrendous.
I
It's
hear you.
it's not going to be concentrated as much.
No, you're absolutely right. I feel the same way. That's a great point. Every week, my player pool is bigger this week than it's been in I think all 5 weeks this season.
Yep.
Yeah. It was really tough. I tried to get as many good plays in as I could, but you're never going to be completely satisfied. If you're playing 20 or 150 lineups on a slate like this, you're always going to find guys that you wish you had more of. And when you do everything you can to work in more of them, you just have to make sure that it doesn't trash the rest of your lineups. And that's the big thing here. But all three of those guys are in play. With Mixon, you've heard Marvin Lewis say he's gonna work him back in slowly. I don't really buy that, but at the same time, it might be enough for me to say, all right, I'll go with David Johnson over him, or I'll go with whoever McCaffrey over Mixon and play the wait and see game. So yeah, just so many good running backs around that range that I don't feel the need to force him in. On the other side, I think Kenny Stills is fine, especially if you were running back a Cincinnati stack with a wide receiver from Miami. Kenny Stills is definitely my guy here. Leads the team in air yards, is definitely capable of producing big games. He's volatile, but that's okay. You're playing tournaments. And then what do you make of Kenyon Drake? Because it has been a absolutely disastrous season for him. And Frank Gore has begun to get more work than he has.
It's really a low point of society. I've been playing him, and it's not even that he's playing bad; he's just non-existent. Uh, honestly, if I was playing 150, if I made a lot more lineups, I'd have maybe 5% of that a guy like that. I think Stills is the one guy you could make a reasonable case for. Other than that, it's aggressive dart throws, and I did not go there.
Yep, I think so
It's
too.
bad. It's an unnecessary risk for me. I don't really see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I'm not going to go there. There are too many cheap running backs to where I have to go and be like, you know what, screw it. He hasn't done it yet, but I'm going to force him in because he's burned me so often. I have to get a good game from him. It's just that's not worth it. Let's talk about the Chargers in Oakland though, because I'll be honest, Ben. I really like Keenan Allen and I really like Melvin Gordon this week. I just don't have a lot of Phillip Rivers. I don't know if I have any actually, but I have a lot of Gordon and a lot of Keenan Allen.
No Rivers for me either, and of course you can make a case. I have a ton of Melvin Gordon. All in all, I think he's one of the safest plays on the board. I just don't see many ways where he doesn't get multiple looks in the red zone, whether it's through the passing game or on the ground. And it really does feel like a typical Melvin Gordon game where he has, say 140 total yards and a couple touchdowns and some receptions. And it's just an all around really nice game, even at this price tag. So he was a staple of my lineups. And that's another guy I had to make sure you sacrifice a lot when you pay for him. It's tricky, but I did make room.
Yeah, so did I. I made room for both of them. And I, I, I'd be perfectly fine with playing them both in the same lineup. I don't know how many lineups I have them both, but both of them are really good plays. But again, the reason I don't have a lot of them in the same lineup, and I'm okay with that, is because there are other running backs, similarly priced to Gordon that could give you very similar, if not better, production, and that's where I'm trying to stay focused because I don't want to get locked in too much on any specific player. There's just so much at the top of running back and wide receiver,
Oh yeah, there's no matter who you're really taking, there's a reasonable opportunity cost, and if the concentrated ownership, you have to look elsewhere. I don't feel, especially with NFL in general, like this is not a spot where I unload 90% on a guy. I just don't think those spots are existing with the way we've been seeing the slates.
No, absolutely. I agree with that entirely. Yeah, both. I mean, if you wanted to throw a dart at Mike Williams and hope he catches 2 touchdowns, I don't hate it. But outside of that, it's 2 guys here for me. Rivers is a fine cash game play, but I think Stafford is just a better play at $1,000 discount. I assume you agree with me there.
100%.
Yeah. What about for Oakland? Their offenses look better lately. Their defense is still utter trash, but the offense has been better, and Chargers defense has been the furthest thing from as advertised.
It really has. I am more interested in the Chargers D than most this week. I don't think that Oakland's as I don't know. It's tough because we've talked about this before. We talked about it on Thursday. Carr can be successful while being wildly inefficient from a fantasy perspective. I don't think Oakland's going to play a clean game, but they still could get theirs. Amari Cooper, he's probably going to draw, tough assignment, but I don't mind it going against Hayward. I think they still look there. I don't have any confidence in Jordy, but Jared Cook and him are guys that I see. I see valid reasons for playing them.
Me too. I have a good amount of Jared Cook this week.
I prefer Jimmy Graham, but I see it.
I do too. I have 15% Jared Cook, which I think is a decent amount. Jimmy Graham is my highest owned tight end though. So there is that. And I'll be honest, I know he's going to be chalky, but I do have some Vance McDonald, a decent amount. Atlanta's just been so bad in the middle of the field that it's very, very difficult for me to say fade him at that price. I actually think Vance is good chalk. Now any tight end that sees like 5-6 targets a game can easily be faded. So I'm not saying that, but I do think that, his yards after the catch ability for a tight end is pretty impressive. So I'm definitely going to have some of him, but yeah, I like Jared Cook for sure, Ben. And I have him behind Graham, but with how damn good he's been this year, Jared Cook, I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish as the top tight end again. He's just done it so often. It's like his breakout year, and it's been how many years since he's been in the league? It's really wild.
Been waiting on that for a long time.
Yeah. Lynch has been great this year. That price tag, you want to talk about no man's land. I don't think I'm going to be forcing Marshawn Lynch in anywhere. Maybe on another slate I would, but no.
Yeah, just didn't get there. Just one of the guys I had to cut out.
Yeah, exactly. Could he have a good game? Sure, but it's hard to recommend him when there are 5 guys that we've recommended within $800 of him at the position. So, one of those guys is David Johnson. Let's get to this Arizona San Francisco game. We don't have a ton of time left, but David Johnson. It hasn't been a great season for him at all, but I mean, Ben, he saw 22 carries last game. The recipe for them at least keeping games competitive is to get him the ball so they can control at least the time of possession. Because when they don't, it's 3 and out. The defense is on the field for 45 minutes of the game, and Johnson gets no work. They don't get the ball back in their hands, and it's dreadful. And a serviceable defense looks terrible because they're trashed by the third quarter. I just don't know how you can't love David Johnson at 6,300 despite not having the greatest year this year. We know the upside. He is, in terms of point per dollar upside, in terms of ceiling at this price point. Is there anyone that from an opportunity cost has more upside than Johnson at 6,300?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. He's probably my number one play on the entire slate, to be honest. It's I'm gonna have a ton, and I get it. Buyer beware if you think you can get away with it again. It's been working. I'll just say this though, he hasn't been as bad as people think. It's also been that the points have gone insane. Like last week, he returned a decent clip for where he was. He just got masked because you needed 200 points to cash. And
Yeah.
I don't know, at 6,300, Rosen looks better. I think they stay competitive, and it's because of him. I just, again, a guy that I chose to make room for, and I'll live with those results.
Yeah, me too. It's that simple. You're right. It's that simple. It doesn't have to go past that. Super talented, good matchup. If they want to move the ball downfield and score, David Johnson is your answer. Larry Fitzgerald's playing at less than 100%. It's that simple. You're absolutely right. Um, Aside from that, though, I have a little bit of Matt Breida, but his price makes it tough to get any more than just a little bit. So that's all I have. Marcus Goodwin's out, by the way. David Johnson is the one guy from this game that I like. Maybe a little Breida, but that's it. Do you have anything I'm missing?
No, I've seen Christian Kirk throw around. I think it's fine, but ultimately I didn't get there. And Breida, I see the logic there. I don't have as much as I wanted to, but it's just David Johnson for me in this game, basically.
Yep, me too. All right, Minnesota and Philly. I tell you what, this defense for the Philadelphia is good at 2 things: rushing the passer and stopping the run. They're very good at both. Their secondary, you want to talk about a beleaguered secondary. That is this team right now. Darby, Mills, Jones, they've all looked terrible. God, Diggs could have a monster game here, and Thielen, who has 12 targets or more in every game. If they have Cousins getting the ball out of his hands quickly, Thielen could have a big game. But I have a decent amount of Diggs this week. I think all it's going to take is one for him to break off a 70-yard touchdown down the sidelines. Like, I think it's very possible here.
Yeah, and Cook is out, I believe. No Dalvin, right?
No Dalvin.
No Dalvin. So yeah, I mean that's an interesting. Andrew was high on that on Thursday. The Cousins to loading up with those guys, and I see it. I'll be honest. When I tried to build like that, it was really tough because by the results of doing that, you sacrifice most of the Steelers or the Falcons' big options, and that was tricky. But if you say, hey, I think I can live by fading this big over under game, I'm gonna zig while everyone zags. Not a bad spot because that game has sneaky shootout potential. You just mentioned it. So Cousins to those guys, I totally get the logic there.
Yeah, yeah, and me too. I don't know how many games. I'm not going to really game stack this, and maybe it'll be a mistake. Carson Wentz, when he's not getting crushed, because the sacks have been brutal for him. The line has not been good, but Carson Wentz with a clean pocket could decimate them. It's just I don't know if I want to rely on that. Tough matchup for Jeffrey against Rhodes. I think Ertz would be the one guy just because he's so heavily targeted. I do like him over Kelsey this week, but I'm not huge on anyone for Philadelphia. You could argue Aguilar has the best matchup, but I don't know. Do you have anyone from Philly that you're really loving this week?
Not really. I did make some teams that went up to get Ertz just because the targets are there. He's great, and I don't think a lot of people want to pay up at tight end. It's just always a natural spot to save. So
Yeah,
I did that, but again, it's not a home run play. It was, oh, I punted in other spots. I have the room. Let me go get Ertz.
absolutely. All right, let's hit this last one,
We
and
got one
we'll
more
get.
after that. We got Seahawks too.
Yeah, yeah. So let's hit this last game.
Oh,
That's
I'm
the.
just see
Yeah, it's all right.
a little slow over
Um,
here.
Rams and Seahawks. This game could decide my fate because I have more than I want, but I do. I wish I didn't, but I just feel like the over under on this is shockingly high. Um, we saw Minnesota put up monster point totals and also a decent defense, even without Everson Griffin. It is tough for them. Uh, get shredded. Uh, and the Seahawks are down KJ Wright and Earl Thomas, which makes me like Cooper Kupp even more. I think guys like Baldwin and Lockett and Kupp. There are ways that this game can put up a lot of points, and it's in Seattle, so I think that helps Russell Wilson. Do you have any interest here?
Oh, huge interest.
Oh,
Wilson,
okay.
one of my cheap quarterbacks that I used him with Baldwin, with Lockett, ran it back with. I mean, you can run it back with pretty much anyone. It's the Rams. They just have weapons on weapons. It's tough to pay the tax to get Gurley, but I did it in certain spots. And this is a game I do think has an inefficient shootout potential. And what I mean by that is I don't think it's particularly close, but it just has the makings of, say, it's a wild one and it's 42-24, where the Rams are always ahead, but they're both getting there.
Right. Yeah. Oh man.
It's going to be
I
tricky.
feel,
I don't know. Makes me nervous a
yeah.
little.
Makes me super nervous, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna have some Baldwin and some Lockett. I might even have a little bit of Nick Vanette. Like I look with the way the Rams are scoring. It's only logical to say, all right, well, you have to run it back with the other side of this game because Wilson's going to have to throw. And despite not having a great season, he's still a very good quarterback. And I think he can make it happen. The only thing that sucks, he's not really using his legs as much this year. And that does
I
concern
know.
me a bit.
I've been using him, and that's part of the reason I use him is obviously like Cam, where you say, hey, he's going to give me 5 points minimum on
Right.
that floor. He's not. I'm hoping maybe with a push up the middle that we're going to see with Sue and Donald, that it'll kind of force him out of the pocket. Maybe he gets into
Absolutely.
some runs.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Let's just hope it works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just hope that that pans out because otherwise, I don't know. It would be good for Baldwin and Lockett, but still, it's a bit concerning. I do like Cup here, though. I think it's a good spot for Cup, and really, it doesn't really matter. It's a good spot for anyone named Cooks, Woods, Cup, Gurley, Goff. How can you even bet against them in any matchup?
It's they seem borderline matchup proof. The Seahawks defense is in shambles. I know they're at home and that will help, but my God, it's pick your poison, but it's not even like other teams where it's like you got to guess right. It seems like you can't guess wrong because they all get there at the same time. It's like, oh, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
And they play the same snaps. They see the same amount of targets. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they're great. I like Woods. I like Cup. Obviously, Gurley's one of the best.
All right. Any last words?
No, I mean, I say this often, but now more than ever, you're not going to get every superstar that you want in there. So don't be afraid to make a stand and say you're going to have to roll the dice. If you try to take them all, you're going to end up having under on all of them, and then that gets you nowhere.
Absolutely. Jay Shot says, "What's the cheapest D of the week?" I'm gonna have some Buffalo, man.
So
Risk.
bad.
You're gonna have some too, though.
The Vikings D, for what it's worth, is also 2,300, and
Yeah,
it just shows how far they've fallen. But man, I still don't think they're that bad.
me neither. Wish you guys the best of luck, but yeah, I give you Buffalo, and like Ben said, don't feel like you are obligated to fit everyone in. There are so many good plays everywhere. Take a shot. Take a
Yeah.
shot. Jason, he says, "LOL, LOL, LOL." Well, dude, you know what? There are good cheap defenses. Sometimes you got to take a shot, my dude. And if it works, it works. If not, well, you can tell me next week. All right. Thanks for hanging out with us. It's been a fun one. Good luck in week 5. We'll see you back here soon. Stick around. You got more programming coming up next. Going to lead you up to lock till 1 o'clock Eastern time. Best of luck, fellas.